Welcome to PAR Podcast, episode 75.25. PAR Podcast is an audio supplement for Public Administration Review, the premier professional journal in the field of public administration. This year, 2015, PAR celebrates 75 years of furthering public administration research, theory, and practice. This episode features comments by Donald F. Kettle, a professor of public policy at the University of Maryland. Professor Kettle discusses his article titled, "The Job of Government, Interweaving Public Functions and Private Hands." This article is currently available in Public Administration Review, Issue 75, Volume 2.
Hi, this is Don Kettle from the University of Maryland with a podcast on my March-April 2015 article published in Public Administration Review, The Job of Government. It begins with a look at the fundamental paradox on which the American government is built. On the one side, we have an enduring quest for liberty, but on the other hand, we need a government strong enough to solve the problems that the public expects government to tackle. The problem is trying to figure out how to balance this quest for liberty on the one side and performance on the other, and that's led the federal government increasingly, as well as the state and local governments, to interweave their activities into the public and private hands. It helps to keep the government small on the one hand, but also is designed to try to enhance liberty on the other. If you want an example of that, just look at the famous "keep your government hands off my Medicare." If you look at the way in which Medicare actually works, almost none of the program's recipients and its providers ever encounter a government employee because almost all the federal government's program managers are in charge of managing government's payments to third-party private sector healthcare providers who in turn are paid by private sector financial intermediaries, and they're the ones who talk to the government. It's a hidden hand program from start to finish, and the service recipients are many, many times removed from government. Look at the numbers that back that up. On the one hand, Medicare and Medicaid combined account for 22% of all federal spending, but just 0.2% of all federal employment. That's 22% of spending, 0.2% of federal employees. What that really says is that the way in which the program works increasingly is through a series of intermediaries who do government's work on behalf of government, and that is the key of the interweaving of public and private power. Why does this matter? Two big things really are at the core of this. First is that the interweaving of public policy into private hands creates serious performance problems in many ways. The rapid growth of interwoven federal programs has been associated with big problems in performance. Just look at the U.S. Government Accountability Office's 2013 list of 30 high-risk programs that are most prone to waste, fraud, abuse, and mismanagement. Of those 30 programs, 26 involve programs that are interwoven between the government and the private sector. Interwoven programs are simply more complex to manage. The second big implication here is that there are big challenges for improving public trust in governance. If you look at the evidence in public opinion polling about trust in government, it's not only clear that the trends are going in the wrong direction, that trust in the federal government in particular is bad and getting worse, but the polls also show that government that is closer to the citizens, especially at the state and local levels, have higher levels of trust, and that the more that the federal government has become reliant on interwoven activities, the more its trust and the more trust that citizens have in it has declined. There's a big and profound puzzle here. How can we best equip government to do the job it must do that citizens with more or less enthusiasm expect it's going to do? And there are two things that come out of this. The first is that government's capacity to manage is increasingly out of sync with the job that we ask it to do. The public management reforms that we are trying increasingly just have not closed the gap. The second issue, if government is to be strengthened to do its job, it's got to find a strong and fine balance between making it effective where it needs to be effective without becoming so muscular that it gets in the way of individual liberty and entrepreneurial energy. And quite frankly, that's a puzzle that government has yet to even attack forcibly, let alone solve. The biggest performance problems come from problems in managing relationships across boundaries. It's a profound challenge for public administration, but it's also a huge opportunity to build a public administration that enhances and maybe even redefines democracy for a globalized and interwoven world. Thanks so much for being with me today, and I hope you enjoy the article.
This concludes PAR Podcast, episode 75.25. To listen to additional episodes and learn more about Public Administration Review, please visit us online at publicadministrationreview.org. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at PA Review. Thanks for listening.